There's our surface map for this Wednesday afternoon. Definitely no shortage of weather systems. Yet another one exiting the Rockies and up to the north. Blizzard conditions in Montana and down to the south, looking at another chance of severe weather in the Great Plains. Let's go region by region, starting with the northeast U.S. Up there, cold air advection flowing into that region, temperatures in the 40s, and some showers. But as you go to the west, it rapidly warms up. And at this hour, doesn't show it on the map there, but they are up to 80 degrees in Indiana. Let's go down for a closer look. So there we go. There's the visible imagery. Showery conditions in New England and gravity waves out there in the northern Appalachians. But as you go west of New York City into Pennsylvania and Ohio, clear conditions. But that warm air advection is underway, and we're going to be seeing some very warm temperatures tomorrow, close to 90 degrees in Washington, D.C. In the southeastern U.S., fair skies, some cirrus across Florida, and buildups down south, although don't see any precipitation just yet. However, we can see the east-northeasterly flow. A quick look at the surface plots shows dew points in the 50s. And as we go further north into Georgia, they drop into the 40s. So this air mass is of polar origin. And that's it right there, ridge from the Carolinas into Georgia. And we're starting to see the return flow out there in the Gulf. And dew points come up sharply up to the 70s there in Texas and the 60s in Kansas. Shifting out to the south-central U.S., dry line from a triple point near Great Bend, Kansas, down to about Lawton and just west of Wichita Falls and down to Sweetwater. There's that westerly flow back behind the dry line. They have red flag warnings all through the panhandles across all of New Mexico due to the very high fire risk with dry conditions and gusty winds. And we are looking at an outside possibility of some storms coming together there, Oklahoma City down to Wichita Falls. This is the HREF model viewer at SPC. The FV3, which tends to be a little bit more pessimistic, develops some storms there in Oklahoma. We are looking at updraft helicity, which is kind of a measure of severity. And we got a couple tracks there moving into Oklahoma City around sunset and down into the Wichita Falls to Bowie area. And those continue moving to the northeast and then they dissipate. The HRW-ARW, which is usually a little bit more accurate, develops what looks like a couple of high-based cells along the Red River, but they quickly dissipate after dark. And the high-resolution rapid refresh, nothing at all. So it's going to be a close one. And looking at the visible imagery, it's still quite early. We see the tropical moisture right there, a lot of cirrus moving over that dry line region, and a couple little clusters out there near Guthrie and Seymour. Those could come together a little bit later, but I think initially they will be pretty high-based. But we'll see if that comes together or not, so we're watching this area here in the next few hours. Now the HREF is built from 12Z model runs, and we've already got 18Z model data available, so that's going to update us a little bit. So bringing that forward, we do get some initiation around Oklahoma City, but it does not appear to organize very well. And I suspect what's happening is these cells, they may be getting sheared, or possibly some of that dry air just off the surface getting entrained in those updrafts. Whatever the case, the high-resolution rapid refresh is not very bullish on getting those cells going. And you can kind of see what's happening on the forecast soundings. This samples the air mass just ahead of those storms. A shallow layer, maybe 2,000 feet deep, of mid-60s dew points, and then that trails off into 50s and 40s with height. So there is dry air in close proximity to these updrafts, and just a little bit of capping right there. Some pretty steep lapse rates above that. And you can see there on the photograph, yeah, that's definitely supportive of rotating storms. So for whatever reason, the model is not very optimistic that those cells will organize. And of course, that's why you want to continue watching that model data, watch the surface and radar trends to see what's happening. Heading into the north-central U.S., we get towards that Bear Clinic low there on the Kansas-Nebraska border, also the triple point near Great Bend, so this is a little bit more active as far as weather dynamics. We are expecting thunderstorms this afternoon and especially overnight. We can go back to the HREF and look at the possibilities here. Around late afternoon into evening, you can see one little cluster coming together there around Omaha down to just north of Topeka. And then we get round 2 overnight. That's going to be out there around Grand Island down to the Kansas border. So we're getting into the midnight to 1, 2 a.m. hour, and that's going to be a larger complex. Now let me show you the HRW, ARW, which does tend to be a little bit more accurate. So there's cluster 1 right there in northeastern Kansas, shortly after dark, that moves into Iowa, and then round 2 comes together around Omaha just after midnight. The NAM nest was a little bit more aggressive with that second complex. Let's run this through. There's round 1. Not much to see there, except up there around Sioux Falls, but here's round 2. Yeah, that's a pretty large complex all the way down to Kansas City. That's going to be mostly forced convection, getting about 4 or 5 in the morning, and maybe just a few cells trailing down that front towards Oklahoma. The bulk of it north of I-70. And there's definitely the potential for heavy rains as those cells track through Nebraska and Iowa. The precipitable water values running about 1 to 1.5 inches this evening. And those storms will be augmented by the polar front jet. You can see the thickness packing back here. That's always a sign that the polar front jet is close by. It's going to run about like that. And with that and the convergence and the heating, it could be kind of an active night tonight. Then we get the cold air advection flowing in the back. The winds are going to pick up and we get showery activity moving into the Midwest. But for today, blizzard conditions up there in Montana, up to Saskatchewan. There's one little blizzard advisory up there near Plentywood, Montana, until 6 p.m. and winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories elsewhere in North Dakota and Montana. And then for tomorrow, we're going to be seeing a winter storm coming together, especially in northern Minnesota, up in this area. And here's how it comes together on the NAM model. High pressure up to the north, supplying the cold, dry air. Down at the south, we got the moisture, the instability, and this convective complex that we talked about. You can see that spreading up into Minnesota overnight, and we get areas of snow further to the north where the cold air is in place. And continued development during the day tomorrow. Large area of snow across Manitoba, northern Minnesota, and northeastern North Dakota. And International Falls, somewhere up in this area, they had to cancel their spotter training for tomorrow due to the forecast snow. In the southwestern U.S., a frontal system moving through Colorado and the Four Corners area. Snow showers in the mountains of the Central Rockies, and further to the west, cold air flowing down into the lower elevations of Nevada. Las Vegas at this hour, they got a dew point of 8 degrees. And 9 degrees there at Tonopah. So this air is definitely of North Pacific origin. Also northwesterly winds sweeping down the San Joaquin Valley. And I think that cold front has cleared all of California except the southern counties. In the northwestern U.S., they're getting into a warm air advection pattern. You can see it right there. Westerly flow. A warmer air mass to the west indicated by the thickness contours. So all of that is setting up plenty of clouds and rain this afternoon, and we're going to see that weather system coming on shore tomorrow, producing a lot of rain in Portland and Seattle. Then heading up to Alaska, let's take a look up there. A definite northerly component. You can see the winds there pretty much out of the north everywhere. Also the pressure, about 1028 to 1030 millibars up to the north, and in the 1010s down in the Gulf of Alaska. Temperatures this time of year at Anchorage normally run from 29 to 44 from morning to evening. They've got 28 degrees there, so that's pretty cold there. Fairbanks typically runs 22 to 46, and they've got 19. So definitely cold air mass in place, and that's due to the high pressure up there along the Brooks Range into the Beaufort Sea, and that connects into this 1038 millibar ridge across Canada. Then taking a look out to the east in Canada itself, looks like a very slight warm-up from last week. Not as many sub-zero readings. The coldest reading I'm finding on here is -2 up at Eureka. And the temperatures get as warm as 37 there west of Yellowknife. But another strong weather system raging in the eastern Hudson Bay region. That's it right there. Strong northerly flow, temperatures in the 20s. Could be a lot worse. We could be seeing -10. But that shows you that the seasons are changing, and we're heading into late spring. And this low pressure system, due to the very strong ridging up to the north, that's going to block it and kind of keep that low pressure area locked up in Hudson Bay, where it will gradually fill and begin the dissipation process. Also, I've been hearing a lot about a heat wave in Asia. Let's try to take a look at that. This heat wave has been ongoing for quite a while. Yeah, there we go. So this is going to be about 12 hours ago when they were at peak heating, and I see some very high temperature readings. The worst of it, probably this 108 over 64 at Kolkata. And in Bangladesh, Dhaka, 100 over 72, and lots of readings up there in the upper 100s. So that's certainly some terrible heat. And panning around down into Myanmar or Burma, 109 over 73, that's pretty bad, and lots of readings in the 100s in Thailand. Vietnam, Cambodia, mid to upper 90s. Typically Cambodia, due to the extensive range of vegetation, the numerous flooded fields, the lakes and everything, they've got kind of a moderate climate usually, so that is some severe heat for them. Doesn't look too bad up in China though. And let me pan around to the Middle East, and don't see any real big problems there. I did know that they had some really bad heat up in this region. Temperatures were above normal, I guess maybe 60s or 70s. I didn't really pay much attention to that. But yeah, China, see, now I'm seeing some 80s around Beijing. I think that's a little bit unusual for this time of year. Yeah, there's that heat there that they're talking about. So it is a bad start to the year, but we will be seeing some relief coming by summer as the monsoon sets in. So let's talk about our weather patterns. We'll go up to the upper level charts, 250 millibars. We see that blocking pattern out there in the Pacific. That's a Rex block, cutoff low south of a cutoff high. Also a deep low pressure system in the Gulf of Alaska. That's a branch of the polar vortex. And the polar vortex is a little bit on the weak side. The AO pattern, which is the annular mode, is in the negative phase, which tells us that the strength of that polar vortex on average is a little bit weaker than usual. The PNA pattern, which is defined by high pressure aloft in this region, low pressure here and low pressure here, is neutral. There is a little bit of a evidence towards a positive PNA pattern. Looks like everything's kind of like shifted a little bit further to the west. So it's not really a textbook PNA, and I'm not even sure you would call it that. And as far as the NAO pattern, that is slightly negative. So the flow out in the Atlantic is a little bit locked up and not flowing very well from west to east. It's kind of like the pipes backing up over the Atlantic. And just a quick look at the trends over the next few days. Here in the U.S., kind of a progressive pattern. There's a trough right there over the central U.S. producing that weather in the Great Lakes down into the Midwest. Continued troughing in the south central U.S. into Sunday and Monday. You can kind of see the troughiness right there. A lot of the ridging is off the west coast, and that'll keep the conditions nice out there in California. And temperatures will be coming up, especially as that ridge builds over Washington around midweek. Let's take a look at some more familiar charts. There's that weather system there in Kansas. Cold front, warm front. This is kind of a complex series of waves right there. And we've got the ridging at the surface building in, pushing that cold air down into the Rockies and the northern plains. And also that little chunk of cold air across the Great Lakes gradually getting dislodged by the warm air advection. And the core of that warm air advection coming off the Gulf into Arkansas and Texas. So that's what we have right now. So what's going to happen is this weather system here will move to the east and shift all of the weather out into the Midwest. So there we go. That's going to be tomorrow evening. You can see the cold air flowing back in behind. There's going to be some cold core convection moving down into Iowa, Minnesota, and Illinois. So it could be kind of a showery pattern in that region. Also, ahead of this cold front, conditions will be very warm in the Appalachians. We will be seeing temperatures coming up to 90 degrees across much of Virginia for Thursday and Friday, and 80s up there in New York. Down in Texas, we will have the tail end of that front. Let's back that up to tomorrow evening. So we're going to have this window of possible thunderstorms in Arkansas, Missouri, down into North Texas. There's the SPC Day 2 outlook, a slight risk across much of North and East Texas, all the way up to St. Louis. Then for Friday, the cold air advection builds in and pushes everything down towards the Gulf Coast. The pressure gradient's not really that strong, so we've got a low right there, cold front at some ambiguous location there on the Texas coast, and connecting back up into that Great Lakes weather system, where a low pressure area is continuing to spin in Minnesota. Then going into the weekend, lots of cold air anchoring itself over the central part of the country to the Appalachians. You can see that large area of thermal troughing, and we're going to have these waves working down the western periphery of this cold air mass. So going into Tuesday and Wednesday, numerous chances for showers and elevated storms from North Texas all the way up to Colorado and the Dakotas. Mild out east, and not much going on in California due to the blocking effect of that Pacific high offshore and the upper level ridge. And starting out for this afternoon, you can see this on the dew point chart. There's our little wedge of moisture supporting those storms up there in the Kansas and Iowa area. Then we reset tonight into tomorrow. Here's our next round of thunderstorms, all the way from the Quad Cities down to Arkansas and North Texas. That's being supported by that ribbon of orange, which is 60s dew points. And then going into Friday, that's going to be midday, so everything shifts down into Louisiana, Arkansas. 60s dew points still available along that front, so we're going to see storms redevelop once again. That's going to be peak heating right there, so we're going to focus on Louisiana down into the Texas Gulf Coast. And then going into Saturday, that moisture appears to make a shot at San Antonio and Austin. Looks like pressure falls out there in West Texas and New Mexico, bringing that moisture upslope into the Rio Grande Valley and West Texas. There's those 50s dew points snaking up towards Texas and Oklahoma for Monday. And that'll interact with those disturbances working down the west side of that ridge, going into the midweek period. And you know, the more I look at this, the more I think this could support kind of a northwesterly flow storm pattern going into midweek. See, we've got those 70s, 60s to 70s dew points right there, wave after wave working in from the northwest. So that will have to be watched right there. There's another wave for Friday next week. Anyway, lots to look forward to going into Friday's program and next week as well. And that will do it for this edition. I'll leave you with some footage of the Texas Hill Country taken back on Sunday. Also want to thank our new Patreon supporters, Marshall Halleck and Carl H. Watts. Thank you very much for your support. Those contributions definitely help keep the program going, and I appreciate that very much. Hope you have a great Wednesday evening, and we'll see you back here on Friday. Take care. Bye-bye.